How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Happy
Glad.
2025.
Happy 2025. What makes this really special is there's no snow outside for me.
Me too.
But the two things we're going to talk about today are going to be winter safety because we're really fortunate that we don't have any snow. However, the middle of the country and the Northeast is not quite so lucky.
No, and I don't miss that.
Oh, well, you're from Chicago. I'm ready. I'm from Connecticut and New York. I don't miss a single drop of snow. If
Yeah,
I never see snow again in my lifetime, I will consider myself really fortunate.
I agree. I agree. I don't like to even travel if there's going to be snow. I'm just like, no, I had my share. I'm not, I'm done.
Yes, so we got two things we're going to discuss tonight. We are going to discuss winter safety,
Hmm.
and we're also going to discuss portable oxygen masks for
Hmm.
pets, because I have a lot of questions, and Kate can probably answer those questions for me.
I hope so.
I hope so too, because if not, then I got to call the company. So I'm multitasking here.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start off with winter.
Yeah.
So snow and cold and ice. So most importantly, you need to stay warm.
Hmm.
Okay. So what does it mean to be warm? Okay. Um, I mean, there's things like if you're like just thinking of this now, it's probably too late. But your home needs to be better insulated. If your home is not well insulated, there are things you can do to help insulate your home. Okay. You need to be really careful of portable heaters, especially the kerosene and the propane ones. Kate, you come from a family of firefighters.
Hmm.
Why is that a problem?
With space heaters are not, they're just dangerous all the way around. And plug it right into the wall. Don't use a surge protector or one of those strips. Just plug it right into the wall because a lot of times it's just too much and it'll start that electrical strip on fire, which will then turn around and start the house on fire. So space heaters, I would use, but I would definitely use responsibly.
Okay. Every year around this time, something goes into the news about a death in a household because they either brought the generator inside because they lost power,
Hmm.
or they're using propane or kerosene heaters and they're not ventilated.
Yeah, and that's not good. Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about on the other episode about having one of those alarms.
So, layering up, I mean, and I might be speaking to the choir here, and you're like, yeah, 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 we know all about layering up. Okay. But, sometimes there's transplants. There's people who I can remember being on, for those who know the area, I was on 684, heading back in New York, heading back home, and the storm just hit. Wasn't supposed to happen so quickly, but there was somebody with Florida plates in their rear wheel drive vehicle trying to navigate the snow covered highway. Okay. I am really of the mindset that I want to forget how to drive in the snow. I want to be that person that you don't want on the road in the snow anymore. I'm thinking of all the skills I can lose as I age. I'm good with that one.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I know it's not something that I always thought about either when I was living in Chicago, but to have a bag in your car with dry clothing,
Yep.
definitely something important. Whether you want to layer it on or whether your car broke down, you had to go out and change a tire, and now your clothing is completely soaked. But now we have a wind chill of 15 below. Um, just to have something dried to change into, and it could just be a shirt, it could be a sweater, it could just be a pair of gloves.
It doesn't even have to be nice clothing. Could be a set of clothing that you were planning to like toss in the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
right? And just put them in a bag. It's actually what I have in my car. I have all sorts of sweaters, and they're not in the best shape. There's a blanket or so thrown back there, okay, and some really clothes that you know what I really, not that I'm a fashion plate or anything like that, but you know what, I'm not going to the store in these clothes, okay? I'm going to change in the car and I'm going home, okay? And I hope that's all I have use for it. But I always keep spare gloves, spare hats, the blanket, sweaters, and the change of, you know, like some old ratty sweatpants and a shirt that may or may not have holes in it. I don't know. They was destined for the garbage. And socks and dry socks.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's also in my car is food, right? There's bottled water, and there's um, not the most nutritious of food, but you know, like energy bars, stuff I like, stuff I'll actually eat. It doesn't do any good to be like all, yeah, to be like all. Um, I'm gonna only put good quality stuff in the car, and then you look at it and go, I ain't that hungry yet.
Right. Yeah. Well, and as far as, having liquids, that's a little tougher when it's really, really cold because it can freeze inside the car too.
Yeah.
Um,
So don't put sodas in the car, okay? Because it's one thing cleaning up a water bottle that exploded compared to cleaning up some soda cans that exploded.
yeah. I think it was my brother. He had that happen to him. It was not pretty.
No, it's not. That's one of those things where, you know what, I am going to pay somebody to do this because there's just like no way I'm doing it myself.
Right.
The bottom line is, especially for like going into work, nothing is worth your life. If the roads are bad, stay home.
I know. And it's easier said than done sometimes, and I get that.
I
But
was quite annoyed when the first time there was snow on my road up here, and it was like literally it was a dusting. It was like you and I would look at it and go, "Pfft, that's nothing." However, to the garbage pickup, they weren't coming.
yeah,
There was like no discussion on this. We'll see you next Monday if it doesn't snow.
yeah. So there was one night we got a really, really bad storm, and I was bound and determined, like, I wanted to get home after my shift. And I actually made it home, but they were having a hard time keeping the roads plowed. And then I get home and the snow was so high I couldn't get inside my house. Luckily, my neighbor had a snowplow and he was able to do a path. But really, ultimately, it was like, well, now where do I go? Now what do you do? I can't
Yeah.
even leave my house, and yet I can't really travel. It's not like I can travel wherever I need to go because the roads aren't necessarily, I'm able to travel on. So you never know how fast weather can change on you.
Yes.
And I know with that storm, when it came, they were giving about 3 days of a heads up that the storm is coming. And then when it finally hit, people were still going out because they had to go get a gallon of milk. And then the next thing you know, they're stuck in the middle of the highway, just because it came down that fast.
Yeah. You know, Mother Nature's going to do what Mother Nature's going to do.
Yeah.
All right. So heed the warnings. When you get a warning, there are some things we get warnings for and some things we don't. All right. So we get some warnings for snow. And yeah, you know what? The meteorologists, they blow it out of proportion. It's the storm of the century, it's a snowmageddon. And then we get 6 inches and you're like, whatever. Okay. It doesn't matter. Still take it seriously. If you have food that you went shopping 3 days earlier and now you're loaded with milk and bread, okay? Which I can never understand. I mean, I get the milk because cereal,
Hmm.
but I just never could get the bread. But anyway, right? So that just means you have food in the house. You don't have to buy it later. It's not wasted. My husband, on the other hand, because we put the concrete driveway in, and there's so now if there does snow, he has to either shovel it or use a snow blower. And he's like really excited to get enough snow so he could use a snow blower.
It's a toy.
Apparently, it's a toy and should be viewed as a toy because if it snows and he's out of town or whatever, that snow's going to sit there until it melts.
Well, you don't get that much snow though.
Oh God, no. But however, every 10 years or so, we get a storm. We get a real storm. Okay, where it's going to dump 8, 9, 10, 12 inches.
Oh,
Well, which is a significant amount of snow no matter what.
it is when you don't get that all that often.
And when you don't get it, the roads are never taken care of. So what might be a day or two of inconvenience anyplace else, it's a week and a half before now you can get on the road because the roads are bad, especially the side streets.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, where was I? I can't remember where I was, but they didn't really get snow all that often. And they got just a little bit, and it was like the whole world shut down. And I was like, really? But then you have to realize, like, they don't have the equipment
they don't have the
to
equipment.
deal with
They
it.
don't have the- You know, I remember being at the Atlanta Pet Fair back when Ann Stafford had it. And we're going to say our goodbyes because we're driving home. We lived in New York at the time. And so we're going up to Ann, hey, and prior to that, there's people screaming, "Oh my God, it's snowing!" and their faces are plastered against the wall, the windows, looking at the snow. They were like six flakes in the sky. Okay, so we're like, "Oh, okay, whatever." So we go to say goodbye to Anne, and in a panic, Anne tells us, "You need to get on the road right now. Do you see it's snowing? They're going to close the highways." And she was like, and she goes, "You think I'm kidding? You need to leave right now." And we're like, "Okay, see you next year." We
Yeah.
didn't actually hit snow until we were in the mountains of North Carolina.
Okay.
Okay. So we were going up the middle, not along the coast. So we were hitting the mountains, but we didn't hit snow till had to be North Carolina, possibly even Virginia, that we hit snow. Or what I would consider being from the Northeast, real snow.
Right. Yeah.
My daughter's in New Hampshire, and all it's doing is snowing up there by her.
Um,
Yeah, she's done already.
yeah. Not fun. I don't miss it. And you know what else I don't miss too? Speaking of winterizing your house, is when it would get really really cold and you'd have to dribble the water. Make sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's another thing. You have outside water lines. Okay,
Mhm.
you need to dribble. All right, turn the water on just a little bit. Okay, same thing with inside faucets if it's against the wall, which a lot of the pipes are. Okay, mobile groomers. Okay, piece of advice. You want to make sure because I dumped at home. I filled up and I dumped at home. So the first thing I did when I came home in the winter is I unloaded the water and then closed it back up. Because if I waited like a half hour, everything would freeze.
Mm.
Dumped the water, closed it back up. And the smartest thing I ever did was I had a plumber for some of like the wagon tails, the Dodges, the older versions where they have the water spigot on the outside of the van. Okay, I took that off, had them redirect the fill to the interior of the back of the van. So I would fill up the water that would never freeze. I mean, it could, but not coming back and forth. All right. And then I had an inside water line for my garage. So I could fill up. So that's the first thing I did is I dumped the water and I filled it up. Because the more water you have, the less likely it is it will freeze solid because there's just too much of a volume of water. You
Right.
need a little bit of water in the tank, it's easier to freeze, right? Make sure your heaters are there. And if when you're plugging your vehicles in, again, I had an electrician come in and install a 30 amp line that was its own line and plugged into that. So I could plug my heaters in the van. It was all in that one line. Um, Anything else on winter before we move over to oxygen tanks?
You know what? I would have to say too, check with your insurance company. Make sure that if you were to have pipes burst or to have some, if the snow caused any type of damage, that they're going to cover that. So
Yeah, and we should periodically do one of these things on insurance.
yeah, because I think a lot of people forget about that aspect of it until something happens, and then they're like, "Wait a minute, it wasn't covered."
Yeah, yeah. So we will commit to like a full episode on insurance. The most riveting of all topics, insurance.
Yeah.
Make sure you have a cup of coffee before you watch.
Right. So true.
Okay, we're gonna do our one and only commercial, and then we're gonna come back with oxygen tanks.
Okay.
Are you tired of putting off your emergency and disaster planning manual? Look no further. This 67-page fillable template will make the process a breeze. Simply fill in the blanks for your business and gain access to checklists for supplies, common hazards, debriefing, evacuation and shelter-in-place protocols, resources, recovery, maintenance, as well as best intake practices. It's time to take action and be prepared. Get your copy today at positiveed.com/books.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine, sent me a message on portable oxygen tanks for pets. Right? And I thought it was really interesting. I went over to the website and I was thinking, "Oh, cool! I'm going to have to make time to give this company a call because I have questions." Okay, and then let's fast forward to a couple of days ago, and Kate posts up, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to start carrying these things." Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you questions from two different perspectives. One, for me personally, as a pet owner. Okay. Why, as a pet owner, would I want to have portable oxygen tanks for my pets?
Well, I think it really kind of depends on your situation. Like for my situation, one of my dogs has congestive heart failure. So if she's having a hard time breathing, I at least would have oxygen on hand to give that to her to hopefully have her help her catch her breath. The last time I had to bring her into the vet, that's what they did. They threw her into an oxygen chamber and left her in there for a couple of hours. So at least it would get me to point A to point B. And then, once she's at the vet, I don't know how long it's going to take for them to get her back there. So at least she's got oxygen going into her system. So I think for medical issues, depending on what's going on with your animal, for medical issues, it's great to have on hand for the transport.
Okay. So besides congestive heart failure, so I have 4 little dogs here. One, Pooh Bear, by the way, who's sitting in my shirt, has a grade 1 heart murmur and the very, very beginnings of a collapsed trachea. Would having oxygen help for either one of those two scenarios?
I would have to say, yeah. I mean, oxygen doesn't hurt because you're just giving them a more pure form of oxygen, so they can breathe that in. And now, if they're having a hard time breathing, that's also going to help them to get more of a quality of oxygen going in, and more oxygen then therefore gets to the through the blood faster and opens up the vessel. So it's I would say it would be good to have on hand for that.
Okay.
Because a lot of times too with the collapsed trachea, they're sitting there and it's like they're kind of choking, they can't catch their breath.
So again, nothing that my vet will do about either one of those scenarios because it's more informational for me at this point. How long does it go bad? I mean, if I buy it and it sits here for 6 years and I don't use it, is it still good?
I think if I remember correctly, it's about the canister should last about 2 years. So I think the canister itself will say 2 years, but they say that the oxygen in the canister doesn't necessarily expire. So even though it says 2 years, they say sometimes the canister itself will last longer than that. But as far as giving like bad quality oxygen, we don't have to worry about that.
Okay. All right. So it's not necessarily something that as a pet owner, I would necessarily want unless I had pets that might be candidates for it.
Yeah, but at the same time, like you never know when your pet's going to have a
Right.
really
What
candidate
were
for
some
it.
other things besides a chronic medical condition? Is
Mhm.
there anything that a normally healthy pet would have need of oxygen?
Not necessarily. I mean, if they're just healthy and they're just kind of hanging out, would I put oxygen on them? Not necessarily. There's not necessarily a need for that, but you could have a completely healthy dog and the dog started choking, and maybe you release that, foreign body object. It's not going to be a bad idea to give them a little bit of oxygen.
All right, so it could be used in the event of choking.
Mhm.
What about sudden blunt force trauma?
Depends on what the trauma is, but
Okay.
yeah, probably wouldn't hurt if it depends on the trauma on that one. As far as blunt force.
Okay, and the masks that come with it, are they like one size fits all? Do they have?
No. So they have different sizes. So they have small, medium, large. They have cat as well, which is a little bit flatter. And then not the canisters are all the same, but then the oxygen attachment. So that actually puts the output for the oxygen. That's going to be a little bit different. So that's where your small, medium, and large dogs are going to have different reserves.
Okay, okay. And how much ballpark would I expect if I bought it from your website?
So that's where I'm still going back and forth with them, because I think right now we just opened up a wholesale account, but then they're also looking into doing affiliate links. And so I think the small dog is $225 or somewhere along there, and then the medium to large dog is $295.
Okay, right. Watch those Black Friday specials.
Yeah. I know
Okay,
it's a little bit expensive, but I think in the big one you're getting 6 cans. In the
okay,
small dog you're getting 3 cans.
okay. So then my next question for you would be, as a pet professional, a grooming shop, why would it be a good idea if I had that with my first aid kit? Now, before we go there for the pets, do those pet canisters, would they also work on people?
I think they probably would. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen the masks yet to know the fit. Would it be a proper fit for a person? But it's just oxygen. So if you were able to hook that up to an oxygen mask, I don't see why it wouldn't. I would probably, depends, if you want to have it for a person, then get a large dog size so you know that you have the right reservoir for that.
Okay. All right. So getting back to, as a pet shop mobile groomer, why would that be a good idea for me to have?
Well, I mean, you never know when you're going to run across an emergency. Now, number one, I would probably put this on my release form, whether or not the owner would want me
Okay,
to.
that's a really good point. Okay.
So I would definitely, if this is what you wanted to have, I would have that on the release form. But if you have a dog that goes down on the table, or you have a dog that goes down in the tub, And at that point, if you're performing or think that you may need to perform CPR, then it's not going to hurt to put the oxygen mask on. Because what are we doing when we're doing CPR? We're doing compressions, giving breaths, doing compressions, giving breaths. Where this, at least you're getting the oxygen. And that's where, you see paramedics do that on people as well. What do? First thing they do is put an oxygen mask on. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have the oxygen mask, put the oxygen mask on, and then do your transport. And I think that's the whole point of having these canisters is it's to get you from point A to point B. They're not selling it to you, or they do have the capability to sell different items. So if you do have a dog that has heart problems, they've got the chambers, they've got the concentrators that you can do longer term type treatment. But for the actual canister package, it's basically to get you to point A to point B.
All right. So then my question then be, if I, as a pet professional,
Mhm.
put an oxygen mask on somebody else's pet, is that practicing veterinarian medicine?
I think that's a good question. I wouldn't think so because it's just oxygen. They're not taking in any type of anything that's got medicine in it. It's just oxygen. So I don't see how putting on a mask for oxygen to transport a dog that was in some sort of cardiac distress would really get you in trouble. But I think, so that's the thing. When it comes to anything emergency wise, as a pet professional, this is why release forms are important, because even if the dog was choking in my salon and I were to do some sort of emergency technique to have that foreign object come up, and let's say the dog goes home and the owner's like, wait a minute, she's not acting right. What did you have to protect yourself from that? Because we don't have any laws at all that protect us.
That's why the Samaritan laws do not apply to animals.
No, and that's where I know, at least in Arizona, we have a Good Samaritan law type law for veterinarians and vet techs. So if they were to go out and something were to happen, they have the Veterinary Practice Act that covers them. But as far as you and I, we don't necessarily have anything. And yet at the same time, I don't want people to get really scared about that, because ultimately the bottom line is, if you have a release form, and then on top of that, I've talked to a couple different lawyers about this. If something were to happen and they wanted to come after you legally, they have to prove the emergency technique that you performed on that animal is what caused the demise of that animal. If they can't prove that, the lawyers every single lawyer that I've talked to has said it's a pretty gray area. So if you have a release form, they gave you the permission to do that. We also have to realize too, even though for us, they're sentient beings, on the law books, they're still considered property. So the liability, I think, is why there's such a gray line for that liability, because of the fact that it's property.
All right, maybe we get a lawyer on to interview for this. So if anyone is listening who knows a lawyer who's game for us, please let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. So we will be back next week, the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Always up for a discussion on what you would like to talk about. Maybe we'll pick it if it's like weather throws something at us. Didn't throw snow at me or okay, we're good.
That's true. But we know what they're going through.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I can sympathize
completely.
I'm here 5 years, and we've had in 5 years, if I totaled up all the snow I've had in the last 5 years here, it's going to be less than a foot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that is kind of nice. An inch here, an inch there. Sometimes we'll get a whole whopping 4 inches.
Yeah, I could probably handle that. That's not so bad.
No, it's not.
I mean, it's not none, but
None is always better. However, my husband is dying to use his new snowblower. Maybe
you'll
I'll
have to do like fake snow.
maybe we'll get like one of those snowmaking things, another toy to cover the driveway so he could plow it.
So he could just use it and say he did it.
Yep. All right, everybody, we will see you next week.
Bye.